for me, programming computers like feels a little bit like playing computer games or something. It's actually even better because, you're not in someone else's world, you're creating your own world.
Today, I had the pleasure of interviewing Adrien Treuille. He's the co-founder and CEO of Streamlit, which is pioneering next-generation tools for machine learning engineers. Adrien has been VP of Simulation Zoox, lead of a Google X project, and was a professor of computer science and robotics at Carnegie Mellon. He gives talks around the world, including to the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology, and has won numerous scientific awards, including the MIT Top Innovators Under 35. Adrien and his work have been featured in documentaries like What Will the Future Be Like by PBS/Nova and Lo and Behold by Werner Herzog. In today's episode, we talk about Adrien's experience moving from academia to industry, how Streamlit was inspired by hardware used to create electronic music, and the philosophy that guided most of his career decisions. I hope you enjoy. Adrien, thank you so much for coming in. Obviously, you're the founder of Streamlit, which is a platform that I love, and I can't get enough. I've been using it so much in the last couple of months, really. I'm just grateful to have you in, and I think we're going to have some really cool topics around your background, but also around how to leverage Streamlit really effectively in anyone's workflow.
Cool. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. So the first question I ask most of my guests is around how you first got interested in kind of the data science or the computer science space. If I understand correctly, I mean, you have your PhD in computer science, so you probably had to be very interested to go that far.
Yeah. Well, I got a late start. So I was studying international relations, and I became disenchanted, and I actually quit college briefly. And then my econ professor, who remembered me from this like giant econ 101 class, because I had blue hair, and so I like really stood out in the class. And then he said that I asked some good questions, and so he sort of put the two together. And he and I chatted, and he was like, "You really need to do like math or computer science. That's actually what's going to make you happy." Which was a kind of mind-blowing idea, but basically it was a life-changing idea. Because I started taking intro to computer science and for that matter, math, like junior year in college, maybe. And it was like, this is amazing. I can't believe this is a thing that you can actually do. And it's considered like semi-respectable because it's so fun. It's like, for me, programming computers like feels a little bit like playing computer games or something. It's actually even better because, you're not in someone else's world, you're creating your own worlds. So, like many people, I became sort of addicted to it. And it was not just computer science itself and writing code, but actually math as well. And I think that those two intersect in a really like beautiful and amazing way in machine learning, in numerical computing, which is simulation and computer graphics. And those ended up being what I did my PhD in. And so it was like a dream come true to realize that this is like part of life. And that's kind of how it happened.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, admittedly, I got my start related to computer science or machine learning really late as well. I mean, I studied economics in undergrad, and
me too. Yeah.
I hadn't written a single line of code until probably 2 years after I finished college. And then I eventually went back and did my master's in computer science. And it's like, wow, I think there's a message that, I probably wasn't mature enough to sit down and code for a long period of time when I was younger, but it's never too late to start to learn this. You might get hooked, and, there's so much opportunity before you, especially if you have a passion or affinity for it.
Totally. And it's also a field in which I feel very up to date, in part because there's just so much literature produced, online. So I think it's actually much more amenable to self-study than a lot of fields, basically. So yeah, I totally agree with that. I totally get it. Discovering computer science, whether early or late, for the right sort of mind, is just super exciting.
Incredible. And so, I want to dive a little bit more into
the decision to pursue a PhD? Was that something that just seemed natural to you because you're like, wow, I found this thing that I love and I just want to keep going down that road? Or was there other considerations? Was there a trade-off somewhere in there?
It was totally the right idea for me. And this is a case in which I really have to thank basically my professors, because I think that had I not gotten a PhD, I would have just gone work for a company, which honestly would have been great too. And it's like such a different life that I can't really imagine it at this point. But what happened was my professors were like, hey, I think you might have a knack for this research thing. You should really just give it a try, apply to some PhD programs and see what happens. And so I was like, okay, I've never thought about doing that. This is a totally insane idea, but why not? So I applied. And then it was really only after I got into school, so I ended up going to the University of Washington, Seattle, that I realized oh, wow, computer science research is a thing. It's an opportunity to, in some ways, do a lot of the most fun aspects of computer science, which is write research code, they call it, basically little snippets of code that are proof of concepts. You get to work on really hard problems. And computer science is a great field because a lot of smart people get PhDs. So you're around, it's not like you're in some kind of dusty old academic, I don't know whether there are some other fields in academia that feel that way, but computer science is not like that at all. It feels very plugged into industry, very plugged into the future, stuff that we were doing was getting picked up by Google and used in their products. And, stuff that Google was doing was affecting our research, that kind of thing. It just felt very current. And then I didn't know this, but it turns out that in the US, most major PhD programs are free. So you're getting a amazing graduate level degree for free, which is the best deal ever. My friends are all paying gobs of money to whatever, law school, medical school, whatever. And I was getting on some level the same quality education, albeit in a different field, for free. Actually, I was getting paid. That's the thing. Most PhD students are paid if you're at a top
stipend
school,
or
a stipend. Yeah, I mean, you're not not exactly
bucks,
putting away for retirement, but yeah, you do get food on the table.
So, I mean, that's something a lot of people ask me is, do I need an advanced graduate degree? Do I need a PhD to become a data scientist, to break into this field? And, that's something that I wrestle with. I mean, I have, again, 2 graduate degrees, but no PhD or anything. But I have to imagine that there's some characteristics or some things that make a PhD suitable for some people, and only going to a master's level or not even getting a graduate degree suitable for other people. Is there something in that decision-making process that, there's a question you can ask yourself to say, hey, this going down this path would probably be right for me, or, maybe the other way?
Well, okay. I mean, it is true that getting a PhD opens up a class of jobs that are basically inaccessible otherwise, which is research jobs. So the top tech companies, tend to have research labs, and in some cases, really big research labs with hundreds or thousands of people in them. Microsoft, Google, Facebook, Amazon, I presume. I think Apple is building this up more and more. And that's a style of work which may or may not be interesting. It doesn't mean that you're usually not working on current products and stuff, but that's uniquely accessible to people with research, with PhDs. Generally speaking, I mean, there's exceptions to everything. And there's, by the way, amazing researchers who don't have PhDs, but it's rare because there is a little bit of training sort of involved in terms of not even technical knowledge, but almost how do you write a research paper and what are interesting topics and those kinds of things to a little bit, passed down as almost apprenticeship model. So there's that. There are certain jobs that you can only get. And then there's certain fields working on super advanced, I was working at Google X, very crazy scientific projects and stuff. If you look at the sort of staff, you'll find a lot of PhDs. So yes, there is a sort of edge of technology style of job that is mostly done by PhDs. But I would say that the real question like one should ask themselves is always, by the way, not just about PhDs, is like, would I have fun doing this day to day? Because, if not, definitely don't do it. You're not getting paid a lot. And if so, in a way, I think it's a really good reason to do it, actually. And first of all, it's important to be happy, but also, doing things that you love, there's a lot of cool things can happen when you do things that you love. I think people underestimate that. They try to figure things out too much. Yeah.
I like that. I'm a big kind of go with the flow type of guy. And,
Totally.
the more you realize that any one decision you make, for the most part, is reversible. You start a program, you do all the application, and you hate it. Like, there's still probably going to be plenty of options available for you. I mean, I have some good friends over at the sharpestminds.ai. They have the data science mentorship, and
Cool.
I believe one of them, is halfway through his PhD program, and he's like, I don't think I want to do this. I'm just going to go start this company, and it worked out perfectly well for them, right?
Totally. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I totally agree. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, so something you brought up, which is particularly interesting to me, is all the research that a lot of these large tech companies are doing. Mm-hmm. Is there a certain point where universities are not going to be publishing the most advanced research? I guess in theory they aren't. I mean, NVIDIA or Facebook or some of these companies are really doing the most cutting edge stuff with a lot of the kind of deep learning methods. Like, what do you see that future landscape looking like?
Yeah, that's a super fascinating question. An interesting observation is one of my best friends is a professor at Stanford, actually doing RNA biochemistry, which suddenly is really important because of COVID and just in general, it's just in the past, even before COVID, in the past couple of years, it's like this massively important field. And before that, it was super academic. And he kind of pointed out something to me, which I didn't quite realize, which is it depends on the field, whether the really good stuff's happening in academia or whether it's happening in industry. And it's related to a couple of different issues, like things that tend to be like hyper mathematical or require like incredible amounts of just very difficult to achieve expertise. Like academia actually excels at that. So math is a perfect example. Like the best mathematicians in the world are in academia. And in other fields, like maybe let's say drug discovery, it requires a lot of expertise, but the limiting thing is how much money it costs to do. And in those fields, the best research is happening in industry for a variety of reasons. Money is the big reason. And then sometimes it flips. And I actually think that what we're seeing right now in computer science is a flip. So 10, 15 years ago, even, a lot of the most important machine learning that we all use today was academic research 15 years ago.
A long time ago, yeah.
Yeah, well, some of it a long time ago, yeah. But even the like deep learning stuff, that was all published in academia not that long ago. So it really did, if not for academia in some ways, we wouldn't have deep learning. So that's, but as the cost of doing deep learning becomes incredibly expensive, basically, and also as companies have an appetite for research because they see it affecting their bottom lines, and so they want to pay big salaries to researchers and so forth, we start to see the pendulum shifting. And so I do think one of the big shifts in the past 10 years in computer science is a shift from academia, not completely, but to a certain extent, to industry in terms of where the action's happening, in terms of really just the most earth-shattering, cool new stuff. Where is it coming from?
That's awesome. And, I'd like to relate this back to your own personal story. Is that one of the reasons why you decided to move into industry from your academic work? Or?
Yeah, well, I think yes, although I didn't look at it at the time that way. So I think, I said, well, just someone said you should go to academia, and then when I was in academia, I became a professor, and then someone said, hey, you should consider going to Google X, this cool thing that they're doing. So it was just random people saying, hey, you should consider this, you should consider that. And I do think that we're just little twigs in a river in some sense. People I think overestimate how much they really control their destinies and certainly their options, which are mostly just presented to us. But so I was just floating along, but I did do this shift from academia to industry. And then looking back on it in retrospect, I realized that a lot of my friends in academia, great professors and stuff, are now at Google, Apple, and places like that. And I feel bad saying this because honestly, there's amazing people in academia. I mean, there's just no question, and it is the right place to do a lot of things. But I do think that there's been a shift a little bit in center of gravity, and so now, if you want to, some of the best researchers in the world are working for big companies, actually, in computer science, and so I not that I would count myself in that category, but I do think that probably in retrospect there was an element of I was just getting carried along by the flow, and that's how I ended up switching.
Well, I think that there is something really beautiful and powerful with going along with the flow.
That'll be the theme of this conversation.
Yeah, well, how do I put this? I mean, everything I've done outside of my main work has been focused on, creating content, creating information, building systems that hopefully are helpful to people in decision making. And I've created, a lot of speaking opportunities, a lot of things that I was really interested in doing because people are seeing these things happen. And it's not like I'm actively going out and pursuing these things. It's that I've worked really hard on the stuff that I thought was important. And in turn, that created some gravity around bringing the things that I wanted to do because they were in line with what I thought was important to me rather than the other way around.
Totally. And I just think that's a big thing in my life too. And it's just like a fractal importance. Like it's of importance in the biggest things and in the smallest things. Like it's how I created Streamlit, but it's also like how I figure out stuff to do with my son every day, because I find stuff that we both like to do and I don't try to force it. And I think that pays back dividends like so much. So I really think that's a great algorithm for life. And by the way, I have at times not done it. Many times actually not done it. I've thought, oh, this is more prestigious, or this is gonna make more money, or whatever it is. And those were the less good decisions I made. In other words, the ones where the fundamental question was like, what am I gonna get in the future? And how am I gonna get this like far away thing, rather than asking like, what do I want to do now? I mean, I suppose you could take that too far also, but that's something that I've really learned. And when people ask me, how to decide what to do, I just think you should really focus on the present. You should emphasize the present.
Greedy algorithm for the present.
Yeah. Exactly. It's a heuristic.
I love it. So, circling back, just one more thought on the career shift or whatever that might be. Was there anything that did surprise you about working in industry aside from academics? And I would imagine that's something that may or may not have prompted you to create Streamlit as well.
Yeah. Well, I was like super invigorated by industry, and it wasn't that. I guess there were a couple of things. For one thing, well, this is a funny one, but like in academia, so I was a professor, and you had very few boxes on your schedule every week. You had to show up for class, and you had to show up to meet your grad students. And other than that, it was like a lot of free time, which if you're incredibly disciplined, you use like properly. I was like not that disciplined. So, and I think that, that's a funny thing where it's like, it seems like such a detail. Like, what does the actual cadence of your day look like? When do you have to be at work? When do you get to go home or whatever? But that's a difference between academia and industry. And it so happened that I just really benefited from the sort of more machine-like, if you might, element of like a day in the life of someone working at Google in my case. So So that was neat. I mean, that seems trivial, but something that's maybe less trivial is I just really thought that product development was really cool, and I loved how at Google I didn't even know there were such things as like UX designers, UI designers, product managers, motion graphic designers, marketing managers, business development, all that stuff, and I was just like, oh, it's so cool. There's really just this insane diversity of people who come together to build products and to launch them and to have them like thrive in the world. And I was a little bit sheltered from that in academia. And so that was very invigorating to me. And in a way, that was something that I couldn't, once I saw it, I sort of had to be around it.
Love that. That is so cool. I think there's just, there's such an ecosystem around putting anything out there. I mean, even for me making a video, I didn't realize like how important the editing is, how important the storytelling elements are, how important even like putting graphics on the screen were. And if I were to make the best video possible, I couldn't do it all by myself, right? I mean, there's absolutely no way that I could master all of those elements, but each is like this own subcategory, and it's unbelievable the complexity and the intricacy and the kind of song and dance that goes into creating a really incredible product. Speaking of incredible products, I'd love for you to tell me, if you don't mind, the origin story of Streamlit. I think that would be really cool. And for those that don't know what it is, like, how would you describe it in a tweet or something like that?
Yeah. Right. So Streamlit lets machine learning engineers, data scientists, Pythonistas create apps. And not like super complicated apps like, all of Twitter or something like that, but really simple apps like interactive web pages that showcase their work, that productionize their work, often that operationalize it inside of a company. So, I've created a model that predicts, which next product we should recommend to a customer. As a machine learning engineer, you can solve the hard part, which is actually producing that model. But often the last mile problem of getting it in the hands of, let's say, the salespeople in your company is a distinct expertise, very expensive to do, and just as you say, like requires you go to different people who are then building these tools inside the company. And it's not just models. It could be like we have access to an interesting data set. For example, all of our metrics at Streamlit are exposed to the company through Streamlit apps, of course. And in fact, if you for example, or another example is like a little workflow. So if you sign up for the beta of one of our programs at Streamlit, we have a little app that scans, figures out who you are, checks you out on GitHub, and basically tries to predict whether or not you're going to be a good Streamlit user. This is a bit of a secret, but I'll tell your listeners. And that's a Streamlit app. So these are all little workflows that sort of combine Python, maybe a little bit of machine learning, some databases, a little bit of web scraping, and they're wrapped together in an interactive little web page, and Streamlit makes those super easy to build.
That's awesome. And if anyone wants just a very, very simplified example of that, one of my most recent videos where I built just a leaderboard from, querying the YouTube API and stacking up points for comments. That's like a fun and completely hands-on example that you can follow along with as well. So,
cool. Breaking
the third wall there for everyone listening.
That sounds like a perfect Streamlit app. So that's what Streamlit is.
Perfect. And where did this originate? Was it in, for example, in Google, you're like, we're building cool stuff, but we can't give it to business stakeholders in a format that they can use it. And, this is the missing piece, or what did that look like?
Yeah, so that did happen, but that happened in retrospect, basically. So what actually happened was my friend Lucas Bywald and I, he called me up. He's the CEO of Weights and Biases, which is another really cool machine learning infrastructure company. They're doing they're doing a lot, but it's primarily experiment management, which is another really fascinating aspect of machine learning, especially deep learning. But so but this is like sort of before Streamlit was a company, and I think Weights and Biases was just in its inception stage. And he calls me up and he goes, "Hey, we should go to the woods and code neural nets together." And I was like, "Sweet," which is, I guess you have to have a certain personality to react that way. But we went into the woods and we had our laptops, so we were like, hiking around by day and then coding on neural nets and stuff. And he actually posed to me this question about how the stock market works over dinner. And I became kind of obsessed with it, and I started working on it, and I needed like a way to like play with all these like interactive models I had. So I started building Streamlit for myself. So the short story is, went into the woods with my friends, and we both created companies which are now growing really quickly out of that like weekend, which is, I think, so cool. In retrospect, as I was working on this thing for myself, I was like, and my co-founders and I together, actually, I got them together and we were talking about this. We really realized, wow, this is something that happens in companies a lot, and something that we had seen a lot. Like, we had been at Google X, so we'd seen a lot of data type projects, machine learning, data science. And then I was working at Zoox, which is a self-driving car company that just got acquired by Amazon. And similarly saw this issue where the data science and machine learning teams had sort of privileged access to really interesting data and workflows and stuff, and it needed to get out into the company. And it was super hard to do. There was actually a huge bottleneck there, which was there was a team called the tools team, and there were never enough of them, and there was never enough cycles to actually, take the work that the machine learning team was doing and get it out into the company. So, so that's what we saw in the world, and I think that the success of Streamlit thus far has essentially, it feels like a very resonant project. A lot of companies seem to agree that this is a thing.
Yeah, well, every experience that I've had working in industry has completely validated the need for, just something that allows data scientists, machine learning engineers to show rather than tell.
Yeah.
And, there's dashboarding tools, there's visuals, but there's almost nothing the same as giving someone a website or like something like easily to spin up that they can play with themselves to figure it out.
Completely. Yeah. And you know what? It's the practitioners who know that. I'll tell you, when we first started this company, basically, we had to go to VCs and ask for money, because that's apparently how you do it. And the VCs are basically like, this is not a category. We definitely heard that. They're like, this is not something that data scientists do, as if they knew what data scientists did. But so the point is, like, they had their own conceptual, like, this is what a data scientist does, this is what whatever, blah, blah, blah. And they had their little boxes in their mind. And then they were trying to basically seed companies to solve all these problems. And Streamlit wasn't one of the problems. But if you talk to practitioners, they knew exactly what it was. Yeah. And so, yeah, I feel like hopefully we'll have the last laugh.
I think you will. I don't think there will be a last laugh. I think this will be a continuous, ongoing laugh, chuckle, or at the very least.
Yes.
Something that I really like is the community. A couple of my friends are making a lot of YouTube videos about the Streamlit apps they're building. I'm seeing it on Twitter all the time. You guys are very active there. Are there any projects that you've seen that you're like, wow, that's a really good use case for this? Like, I this was cool to me and I enjoyed it, and I also want to share this type of thing.
Do you mean projects that I think would benefit from Streamlit, or other projects that have good communities online, or what? Yeah, sorry, I didn't.
More of like projects that people have put out there where they have used Streamlit, something.
Cool. Yeah. Well, actually, one of the a really interesting thing about Streamlit is that you can create an app, and we have an open source community, as you're pointing out, and they're typically creating sort of apps just for the world. And now we even like released a feature called Streamlit Sharing, which lets you deploy these, easily. And as a result, we get to some of these go viral. And so you get actually a read on the zeitgeist in some ways, which is like, which apps are going viral? I mean, in March, it was like COVID apps, basically. And we had a huge spike in viewership just related to COVID apps. One of the biggest ones was created by University of Pennsylvania. Okay, so recently an app that went viral was, I don't know if you saw this, it was basically like type in your GitHub handle, and then it'll tweet all of your GitHub stats for the year. It was just so cool. It was so simple. And, it's just the cool thing about Streamlit is like, I mean, it was probably like 15 lines of code or something like that. Actually, I should probably look that up. Otherwise,
it's probably less than a couple hundred lines of code.
Let's just say it was not exactly. But anyway, and so that one was just it was just we had some engineers who were like following it, and it was just like constant stream of tweets coming out of this, and tons of people who had really nothing to do with Streamlit or even Python were just GitHub users were using this and just tweeting out their stats for the year. So that was super cool. I mean, there's an incredible diversity of use cases. And so it's, I wouldn't even know where to start.
I think that was a pretty good start at the very least. You'd alluded to it before with your internal use of Streamlit, like within the organization itself, which I think is like kind of a must do for like you have to use your own product if you want to have a successful company effectively, and it makes sense. But what are some other ways that you guys are kind of leveraging data that might be unique or potentially interesting for someone thinking about running a data-driven organization?
Well, yeah, I think the first thing is that we add Streamlit on top of all of our raw metrics. And that basically gives us like incredible flexibility in terms of like what we display and what we share with the company. And I think that, it's underappreciated how little work you can do in some ways to create like really, really useful things. So people think, I want to buy this SaaS software that displays my user metrics. I want to use Google Analytics or something. And because the idea is like, well, Google spent insane amounts of time and money creating this thing. And so, why would I code this up myself? But it turns out that if you just access the raw data and you add a little bit of Streamlit, you can get to like very, very interesting custom views that are just very, very meaningful to you and not very expensive or complicated to create. And an analogy I would give is, Notion, actually. I don't know if you know that software.
I'm a big user of Notion. So.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so you get it. So basically Notion is like, it's kind of like a janky version of every SaaS software, but the thing about it is, I mean, it's an amazing piece of SaaS software, but like you could sort of create like a janky version of an applicant tracker or a content pipeline or whatever. But the reason why it's so amazing is because like it is actually custom to you. It's just slightly more exactly what you need and slightly less whatever some product manager, in San Francisco thought you needed. And that's what Streamlit is too. It's like you create the tools that you need and not with too much work. And the fact that it's the thing that you actually needed for your business is what makes it so like useful, basically.
Well, I mean, I can definitely attest to that. Something that I've been experimenting more with this year is different visualization tools. I'm also starting to explore some sort of animation tools, which is cool. Because for videos, I mean, it's interesting to show those things on the screen. And I loved that I could use essentially any visualization tool in Python that I wanted to. I was experimenting with like Altair. I was experimenting with Plotly a lot. I mean, I used the traditional ones, Matplotlib and like Seaborn and stuff. But to be able to expand beyond my normal like toolkit and for it to just work and to have additional options for filtering, you know, I found myself, so you can do some like very basic filtering in like Plotly, right? But to do more than that, to add, for example, more than one filter to a graph is overwhelming. But using that with Streamlit, you solve that problem, right? Because you can add the filters outside of the graphs. And I mean, combining these things together to me is so cool, because you can do exactly that. You can make what you wanted so much easier for the exact use cases that are coming to mind. So
yeah, totally.
Yeah, obviously you're speaking to a fan here. So
yeah.
You know, I kind of have two more questions related to Streamlit. And so the first is, you know, what is something you would like people to know about Streamlit that they might not already know, in general?
Yeah, well, I think Streamlit is becoming, you know, increasingly well known as a go-to open source project. And we are now launching, you know, a SaaS version of it for companies called Streamlit for Teams. And it's actually in beta now, and we're signing up beta partners. And this may sound like a little bit of an advertisement, but actually, you know, my co-founder Amanda made a really like interesting point, which is often when we talk to companies, their data scientists are using Streamlit for personal projects, and the reason why they can't use it inside the company is because they need, like, let's say, authentication, or they need to be able to access private data sources, or be able to host it more easily. And so it's actually the lack of these paid features is the reason why it's not being used in companies. It's not because it's like a feature issue, basically. So I think, you know, I guess this is coming off sounding like a bit of an advertisement, but like I do think that like an interesting thing about our commercial roadmap is that we are enabling its use inside of companies in a way that was just very tricky before. And so for those of you who like using it at home, I would recommend that, and you're interested in using it like at work, like I honestly think this would be a great time to do that.
Well,
so
you know,
yeah.
I don't think that came off advertising at all.
Okay,
but,
cool. Yeah.
You know, from my perspective, I almost never have a problem like advertising or having those communications with businesses, right? I mean, this is effectively a B2B product. And like the more awareness you can spread about that, it's like, look, like I'm using this for free in my personal life. A bunch of people in my communities, a bunch of people across the internet are using this to create really cool things. Like, you know, if effectively for businesses, it does cost something to be able to have a lot of these features. I mean, initially, like the data privacy stuff was something that I was worried about, or like being able to connect things, you know, with our internal systems is something I couldn't do initially, because we are working with like paid data sources and things like that I can't release to the public. So, you know, for example, my company is happy to pay for that type of, you know, additional features, because it does mean we can use it. So I definitely wouldn't worry about that front. And I guess that does also kind of lead to the next question, which is, what is the future of Streamlit? Obviously, you're in beta for the more commercial facing features. Are there any other kind of cool sneak peeks that you can allude to in the talk here?
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, I'm like so excited about the roadmap.
Yes.
Okay. So, and we're even trying to like publish this as much as possible, but I'll just share with you like some previews of stuff because, okay. So one thing that's coming up is theming, which is like, and dark mode, which is something that like everyone asked for. And it sounds really trivial. On some level it is, but on the other hand, like, I think we're just going to do it really well. And I'm just really excited about that. There's a bunch of really like profound things happening in Streamlit. Like we're adding state, like fully programmable state and user sessions and stuff. This is all 2021, by the way. So that's going to be I think gonna suddenly make the sort of like level of apps you can create like go up by a lot. And we're trying to sort of remove the idea that like you can't do that in Streamlit because it's too sophisticated. We want to sort of remove that idea. And then on the cloud side, it's just so like we've just got started and the future is so cool. So basically, Streamlit sharing and Streamlit for Teams are like a continuous deployment platform. So you put things on Git, and then as soon as you update it, the app updates in the wild. And that as like a platform for collaboration is just, we just haven't even gotten started yet. So take an app, click a button, branch it. Have two versions of it, your own version and the production version. Have a staging version. Click an app, go back in time and see all the previous commits and actually like live load those apps. It's going to be so dope. And there are bits of it already out there, but the roadmap is just so cool. And so I think that Streamlit today is vastly more sophisticated and improved upon Streamlit a year ago, and Streamlit in a year is going to be that much, if not more. So
incredible. So hopefully that's something I can grow with you guys. I mean, one of my biggest initiatives on my main YouTube channel outside of the podcast is to really focus on building things, to build projects, to do some really cool stuff.
Yeah.
And I think the best way to tell those stories with frankly the lowest effort for me as well is through Streamlit. So
yeah, awesome.
If there's any feature that you think, as I'm going along through those things, I'll connect with the team. And if there's any feature you guys think would be really cool for me to integrate, I think that would be really neat to be able to experiment with all the new bells and whistles as well.
Yeah, and by the way, we have a sort of community-led development pipeline. So if you're an active community member, you can get into betas for a lot of stuff that's not out in the public yet. And so first of all, if you're interested, but also if your users are interested, like you should just come to the forums and say, you can just ask what betas are running, or say that you're interested in certain features, and we can make sure that you're added to the betas for those. So that's a way in which people can play with the latest stuff early.
Incredible. Yeah, I 100% will do that.
Cool.
So my last thing in all these interviews, I really like to open things up and let you talk about something that you're intensely passionate about. It could be advice, it could be anything on that front. But I like to give you the floor to just kind of vibe, freestyle a little bit.
Yeah. Everyone who knows me is going to laugh because they know that I literally talk about this all the time and watch YouTubes about this kind of stuff. Watch YouTube videos about this all the time. So they're gonna know exactly what's coming. But it so happens that I am basically obsessed with little tiny devices, like hardware that lets you create electronic music, or really music in general, but especially electronic music. So this is a real beauty right here, which is called the OPZ. Awesome. It's by Teenage Engineering, and as it so happens, it's this little tiny device. I actually have a Digitact and Digitone, which are these really cool things from this Swedish company called Electron. So fun. You can just basically, if you're having trouble sleeping, 2 a.m., just go down into the living room, plug in the headphones, get these things going, and just sort of get into like almost like a trance-like state. And I'll say that these actually were very inspirational for me in creating Streamlit. And so there's a real connection there, which is that the companies that make these sorts of things, the thing that they really excel in is not just like the raw technical like sound processing, it's like, I want to buy a synthesizer with like 1 trillion knobs on it that allows me to make any sound possible. The thing that they excel in is like the workflow and joy. So it's like, I just want to turn this thing on and I want to make something fast and I want to explore ideas quickly and I want to get, something out. And that was exactly the idea behind Streamlit too. And I think it's really distinguishes us, in the market, as they say, is this notion of just joy and workflow and making it so that the moment by moment texture of the work feels good and fulfilling.
That is so cool. I just love that you're able to kind of blend or get inspiration from different parts of your life and bring them together. That's something I always strive to do. Some areas of my life probably better than others. I mean, I guess a lot of my work is related to me playing golf and eventually trying to quantify that and bring it together. So everyone who is watching, do projects where you experiment with yourself, with your own data, where you're trying to understand yourself better, or try and relate the things that you're passionate about to other things that you're passionate about. Because in my mind, and I would hope you agree, that's where the best stuff comes from.
Totally. Yeah. I should have mentioned, I didn't know that. I should have mentioned this. There's a whole category of like sports Streamlit apps. I don't know if you've seen this, analyzing the statistics of like different soccer players and stuff. So yeah, that's really cool.
Well, I'm actually going to probably do a project related to March Madness coming up.
Cool.
So I'm going to try and build a Streamlit app, and we'll see how that goes related to that. So excellent.
Yeah.
Well, Adrien, this was incredible. Thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed it. And I think everyone's going to love your story, but also love hearing about Streamlit and how much awesome stuff you guys have in the pipeline here.
It was my pleasure, Ken. This was super fun.